We're having a look at two of the big camera phones out in the market right now, the Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra and the Google Fi 5G, and specifically looking at still photography and video. Samsung coming in at $1649 Canadian and the Google Pixel Fi 5G at $799. Is it worth the extra money for the Samsung? We're going to find out. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel yet, why not? It's so easy. Also, make sure you hit the little bell icon to be notified every time we come out with a new video. So before we get into the comparisons, a couple caveats. This isn't by any means a scientific review or comparison. Also, I'm going to be reviewing these on a laptop monitor here. It's an MSI Prestige 14 EVO. Beautiful laptop, but it's not calibrated scientifically to see the exact colors on these. But again, this is just for normal people. If you're like a photo nut, you've probably got your own ways of comparing these photos and videos from these two different phones. And another quick thing as well, the Samsung, it does have the capability of doing 108 megapixel photos off the main camera. We didn't use it in this comparison. We just used the regular mode. It just kind of defaults to 12 megapixels, much like the regular Google Pixel. So it really was kind of apples to apples there. That being said, we did take some pictures with the 108 megapixel. There was not really any noticeable difference between that and the 12 megapixel to our naked eye. Let's get into it. So this is going to be interesting. We took a bunch of photos and videos and we're going to compare them side by side. Is it a fair fight? Clearly the Samsung phone has much higher powered cameras and lenses, but you decide. Having a look here at the first beach shot, we shot directly towards the sun. And there's some interesting things to notice here. Right away, you'll find that the Samsung typically saturates the colors a little bit more. So there's going to be bluer blues in the sky. But looking at the cloud, the sun is behind there. You can see on the Samsung photo, there's much more dynamic range. You can actually see the shadows in the cloud. When you look at the Google Pixel photo, that entire cloud is completely blown out. Looking down at the reflections on the water and even the rocks on the beach, you're going to find there's a little more detail in the Samsung photo. This next photo is really interesting because just kind of a quick glance, I can't tell a huge amount of difference between the two. So if I were to get really nitpicky, the pixels ever slightly softer up in the clouds, and then on the edges here down at the bottom of this cement pipe, a little bit softer. I really had to zoom in on this photo to get a more clear difference. So zooming in here, the shadow on the left of the pipe on the Samsung phone here, you can see that it was actually processed a little bit more. So it seems a bit sharper. And then just even looking at the clouds again, if you're zoomed in, you can see that again, the Samsung seems to have a better sharpness to the actual picture in itself. But again, with this particular photo, not a huge amount of difference for me. But keep in mind, again, I got 50-year-old eyes with glasses, so you might have a different take on this. So we've got another beach shot here, and again, this is taken with both the main camera lenses on the Samsung and the Pixel. Again, you'll notice that Samsung typically saturates the color more, so the skies are bluer. I don't mind that personally. But when you start looking again at the lighting here, the Samsung handles the sun, I think, a lot better. The Pixel kind of blows out the sun a bit more, but that's kind of like real life. If you look directly at the sun, that's probably what it's going to look like. But some interesting stuff happens down in the reflections in the water in the bottom right-hand corner. There's some weird magenta color fringing happening down here, and you can see this when you zoom in really closely. There's some weirdness happening with that. Samsung has a little bit of it as well, but nothing to the extent that the Pixel phone has. But again, overall, they both seem pretty sharp. The Samsung, again, has a bit more sharpness. You can see it in the water. You can see it in the sand as well. Another interesting thing, the color. They've warmed up the clouds in the background there. If you compare that to the Google Pixel photo, that's kind of what I saw on the day of the photos. Hey, I'd love if you subscribe to our YouTube channel. It helps us make more videos for you. So now we're going to have a look at the ultra-wide camera lenses on both of the phones. And they're actually a bit of a difference here. On Samsung, it's 12 megapixels. With Google, it's coming in at 16 megapixels. And this is really interesting to me because it's kind of flipped now as far as the exposure for these different pictures. You'll notice that there's a bit more detail in the pixel photo when it comes to the clouds. It's handled the overall exposure, I think, a little bit better. I find on the Samsung, it's, I guess, maybe a bit brighter, kind of almost washes the cloud out a little bit. What's interesting, though, too, is that the Samsung camera is much wider. It has a much wider view of this particular scene here. You can see it with the big barnacled rock there. You get a lot more of the picture in. But you'll also note that there's ever so slightly a bit of distortion down, kind of around the edges. And sometimes you'll see that with, the wider angle lenses. But overall, both handled this photo well. I did notice that when I zoomed in on some of the rocks here, that the Samsung photo might have been a bit sharper, but you can see as you start zooming in even a bit more, it's really processing that sharpness. So next up, telephoto. The challenge, the Pixel doesn't have a dedicated telephoto lens, so it's actually doing any of the zooming digitally, and you can totally see it here. We've got some side-by-side pictures of this lonely seagull, and right off the bat, you can see that the Samsung is much crisper when it's zoomed in here. I think we're using the 10 times optical zoom here on the Samsung. On the Pixel side, it's the 7 times max zoom that you can get. But if I zoom in on the photo here, you can see right away there is no comparison. The Samsung is crisp and clear. And again, it is because it has that dedicated camera and lens, whereas even the slightest zoom in on this photo on the Pixel and that seagull just turns to mud. So if zooming in on things is important to you, that's a choice you're gonna have to make. It's selfie time, and for this comparison, I actually got our camera guy, Robin, to do them because I'm tired of seeing my face on these videos. And so this is interesting. The Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra, it's got a 40 megapixel selfie camera, which is amazing. But what's interesting is that the Google Pixel 5 5G only has an 8 megapixel selfie camera. But if you look at both of these photos side by side, they're both really nice. It's kind of hard to spot major differences between the two. I found that the Google Pixel made things a little bit brighter. You can see on his jacket, the jacket seems to have got more exposure, or if they've post-processed it in some way. And also on the Samsung, there's a bit of a green tinge at the bottom of his jacket. As far as the overall exposure and dynamic range, I think the Google Pixel did a really nice job with their selfie camera. You can see all the details in the rocks and the waves behind it. I mean, it's not an exact picture because you can see there's a bit more brightness on the water behind him, but overall it's not bad. You can even see the detail in the hair as well. And I think both the cameras have done a nice job with that. One feature that both the cameras have is a portrait selfie mode, which I really like. So the person in the front is crisp and clear, and then everything else is blurred behind them. And there is quite a bit of difference between the two here. The Samsung, you can notice, Robin, his face is much warmer. On the right, on the Pixel, it looks like maybe he slept overnight at the beach. His face is much whiter. There's also a bit of a lens flare on the Samsung side, but you could take the picture again and probably avoid that. And also on the Pixel side here, you can see that there was a failure on the edge detection. You can see right behind him that rock is crystal clear, but again, you could take that picture again and maybe avoid that. But to me, I kind of like the warmer tones in the face, so I think Samsung's done a good job with this one. So now we're doing a selfie video with the selfie camera, and we've actually made both of them 1080p. The Pixel, that's about as high as it goes on its selfie camera. The Samsung is capable of doing 4K, but for this comparison, we did bring it down to 1080p. I have to be honest, I have not seen a lot of difference. There might be a bit of a green tint on some parts of the Samsung, but you know, as far as overall exposure, even the image stabilization is really good on both of them. I cannot see any meaningful differences between the two, and again, both at 1080p. So now we're going to check out the regular camera on both of them in 4K. So these are both doing 4K, 60 frames a second, and it's beautiful footage. There's no question. It's, for me, is really hard to see much difference between the two. The only differences I noticed is when it comes to, again, getting the sun in the shot here. The Samsung, again, seems to handle the really bright light, you know, especially sun, a little bit better than the Pixel. Not dramatically, but still just that a little bit better, especially the color around the sun in the sky, you know, as far as the saturation of that. But as far as all the detail on the rocks and the rippling water, you can see the Samsung's maybe a little bit sharper, but still, I think most people would have a hard time telling the difference between the two, but both did a great job. Okay, so now we're taking video in ultra-wide mode, and it looks like we've got Robin here doing his feet. But you know what's interesting as I was watching this, it's using image stabilization. I found that the Samsung seemed to handle the stabilization a little more smoothly than the Pixel. And so it's hard to say. I mean, is that just because we're looking down? It might be a little different than if you're holding it up. But to me, there was a noticeable difference. It just seemed smoother. The Pixel seemed a little more kind of, I don't even know how to describe that, kind of back and forth. As far as the overall quality, they're both 4K. You know, you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference between the two. Samsung might have a bit more saturated color in it, but as far as the dynamic range and overall sharpness, very, very similar. Really amazing what they can do with slow motion nowadays, especially built into a camera phone. I remember when Olympus came out with it in their point and shoots, and those things were thousands of dollars just for that feature alone. So we've got two here. Samsung, they're doing it in 1080p, and with a Pixel, it can only go to 720. So this is 240 frames per second. We've got this little seagull taking off. They both handle the slow motion really well, but you will notice a difference between the two resolutions. There's no question there. The Samsung with the 1080p, it's much sharper and clearer than the Pixel. I mean, they're both excellent, but you know, I think on this one here, it's pretty clear that Samsung has got the higher quality slow-mo. This next picture was something I was really looking forward to comparing. This is night mode on both of the cameras, and I'm still blown away at how they can just bring up the brightness on these pictures. So this was actually in my front room, in my living room, and it was very dark, but it looks like it's bright as day in here. Both of them have done an excellent job, there's no question. But let's get into the comparison on both. I don't know what magic that the Google software engineers are doing to make that night mode happen, but it's working. I would have to say on the Google one, it's more even color throughout the photograph. You can see the red flower behind me. I think that was much better capture of that particular color. I mean, the Samsung did a fantastic job as well, there's no question, but I would have to give Google the edge in this particular photo. And even zooming in, you know, you can see that on any photo in night mode, but it does start getting noisier. But overall, very close. They've done a fantastic job capturing the detail. You can see down in the carpet by my feet, and also the candle holders. Again, Samsung is capturing a wider photo on here, so there's more of the image, but overall, I think Google has done a great job. You can even see it in the shadows as well. Okay, the last one we're going to look at is portrait mode, and there is a good chunk of difference between the two here. Samsung definitely seems softer. It seems warmer in the background. You can see up in the ceiling there above my head, It is warmer on the Google Pixel side. The ceiling is wider, definitely. And I have to say that the Google Pixel, I don't know, it just seems so much sharper when you look at the shirt I'm wearing and the creases and the texture to it as well. And the color. My face seems, the overall skin tone seems a little redder. I don't mind it, to be honest. It's still nice. They're both excellent, but I think I'd have to give the edge to the Pixel on this one here, just for the overall color tones and sharpness of the image. So that's it. This is super interesting to me because comparing the still photos and the videos, they were very, very close. Samsung definitely has an edge as far as the hardware specs are concerned. They've got more cameras, they've got the telephoto lenses built into it, whereas the Google Pixel doesn't. But overall, if you really had to sit and compare the photos side by side and the videos, you would say that they're pretty darn close. There's no question that Samsung in some of them has better sharpness in them. I do like how Samsung saturates the color. Some people don't like that, but I kind of like that myself. But there wasn't like dramatic differences. The image stabilization in the video, both excellent on both the smartphones, and also the 4K video, that they took. Again, excellent quality there. So the question you have to ask is it worth it to get the Samsung phone, which is literally almost double the price of the Google Pixel 5 5G? So if you're buying the phone for the camera, that is a great question. If you're like a camera nerd and you're really into the specs, and if you're taking a lot of zoomed pictures, you might lean towards the Samsung. They do have the edge on that, definitely. The slow-mo video, if you're doing a lot of slow-mo video, you might like the higher resolution on it as well. But again, the price, it's a great question for those out there. For just normal people that want a good camera on their phone, you might want to save some money and have a look at the Google. If you were into having a flagship phone with all the extra bells and whistles, you might lean towards Samsung. So those were my thoughts about the two phones. Definitely a hard choice if you're going down on price. But what do you think? Have a look at the comparisons in the comment section below. Give us your thoughts. Which one did you think did a better job? What would you choose if you had the money as well? Make sure you subscribe to our channel. We're making a lot of great videos. We also did a great review on the Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra as well, and you can link to it from here as well. And hit that notification button because you'll be notified every time we come out with a new video for you.